Many of you may have already done some things with XHTML and just served it to IE under a different MIME type, but there are a few benefits that it provides you. Number one is kind of a strict fail-fast parsing. A lot of people don't see that as a benefit. They love just how forgiving HTML is, but for other people, they enjoy the fact that they're going to know immediately if there's a problem in their markup, if it doesn't validate, and IE has that XHTML parser, XML-based. It also makes it easier to safely use custom elements. So this is if you have data in a database or you have other data somewhere else that uses, I'll show you an example later on, a t-shirt element or a color picker element. Namespaces gives you the ability to just integrate these elements into another page, maybe a page that multiple people are working on safely without worrying about conflicts. And then finally, it's easier to process outside the browser. So if you're doing anything else with your markup besides just displaying web pages, it's really useful to be able to have it in straight XML and know that it validates. And finally, SVG, of course, is a markup language. And there are a few different ways that it integrates, or that Internet Explorer 9 supports it. One is the standalone XML-based document, inline in an XHTML document, and again, inline in an HTML document. There are a few parts of CSS that I'll talk about as CSS infrastructure. They're not used directly for the graphics and the media support and some of the things that Ted will talk about. First one of these is selectors. So on the keynote, there's a third-party CSS3 selectors test suite that IE9 supports. IE9 passes completely. And it gives you, these new selectors give you the ability to do lots of interesting, powerful things with your website without writing as much JavaScript, which not only makes it easier for you to build, but it also means it'll probably run faster because you don't have to be running as much script on the client. And I'll go through a few examples of these in demos. And the second one is CSS3 namespaces. This is just the CSS corollary to XHTML, so that you can style those custom elements in different namespaces in your XHTML. And again, I'll have a demo of this in a second. And finally, this is on the programming model. So these are largely the set of things we saw under that curve with some additional things. So this is going through and doing DOM core, DOM events, style, HTML, range, and selection APIs that are defined in HTML5. Now, this is a good time to point out that the previews that are available to download now are us in progress. You already saw one video that's not in the platform preview available today, but that will be in an update. And we'll be updating these roughly every 8 weeks from now until beta. So as more of these come out, you'll see new features come online. And what we'd like to hear from you now is both feedback on the features that we have in there, as well as some of the scenarios or other things that you see that are missing. With that, I'm going to get into a little bit of a demo. All right. First one I'll show you is very simple. It's the one that Dean showed this morning, and it's simply a menu, but it uses Add Event Listener. So last week, we gave some of these presentations to different members of the press or other people, typically not web developers. This demo isn't all that exciting for them because it's not that pretty or exciting. But I said, you know what? If you show this to a room of web developers, they're going to really enjoy the fact that Add Event Listener is working in Internet Explorer, along with border radius and opacity. So just want to show you guys this one more time. So this page walks through a few different examples of CSS3 selectors. Oh, second thing. If you haven't downloaded the platform preview yet, when you do, you'll find that the home page is what we call the Internet Explorer test drive. And the demos that we're showing you here are available on that site for you to go and play with. Most of them. I'd say there may be a couple that will be added to the site in coming weeks. So I'll walk you through a few examples of places where selectors really help you do more on your site with less JavaScript. The first is a combination of not and enabled. So the not pseudo selector lets you select something that's not true. And enabled, of course, is enabled disabled. So in this case, if I were to run this selector, it will find my disabled text control, which is great if you're using if you have forms on your page or other things that, again, you don't want to have to constantly check or pull for state, whether it's enabled or disabled. One note about the demo site here is I'm using the selectors API, the query selector all, which we added support for in Internet Explorer 8 to just quickly run a selector on the page. The second one uses the pseudo-selector only child. So this is saying it will find any element that's a paragraph that doesn't have any siblings. And in this case, that happens to be this one paragraph. You'll notice this checkbox control is checked, and it's highlighted. When I uncheck, I get the highlighting changing. I'll pull up the developer tools. And show you that check selector, which sets all the values on that checkbox to make it be the right color. Close them in the background. The next one here I have set up on these tables, and it's called nth child. If you're used to using Word or another word processor, it's really easy to do those banded rows. If you've tried to do those in your pages with dynamic tables, it's kind of difficult because you always have to be recalculating, am I an odd row or am I an even row? CSS3 selectors added a selector called nth child that lets you just say odd or even, or really just put in an equation that IE will compute and then decide whether or not that selector applies. So in this case, what I've done, actually I'll pull the DevTools up once more. So in this selector, I'm using nth child. And I do that to set these different background colors. And if I choose to remove a table row from this second one, I just remove that table row, but my banding has stayed the same. I didn't have to run any JavaScript. I didn't have to do any work custom to make that highlighting stay. So it's a really great way of getting one of these just, what appears to your end users, just a simple effect, which before was pretty difficult and now is very easy with CSS3 selectors. Another one to show here is selection. So selection lets you customize what background color you get when you select. You can see this is the default. And if I run the selection selector, I can change this to be a nice yellow highlight. And as you play around with this, this is one of the examples that's up on the test drive. You can use this to run your own. So, for example, if I wanted to look up checked elements, actually divs that are siblings of checked elements, I can find those as well. So it gives you a nice little kind of sandbox to play around with some of these new selectors. And on the right hand, what you'll see in a lot of these demo pages is just a DOM viewer that's a live view of what the IE DOM looks like. So you can see how it updates and changes as the content on the left changes. Next one I'll show is get computed style. This is one, again, that was on that list, very popular ones. So I think a lot of you are familiar with this. But for those of you who aren't, get computed style returns a style object for an element, but it's based off of the computed values and really typically used values of the browser rather than just what was set in line on it. So the way this demo works is you have a source container with a border style, a background color, and a font color. And what I'm trying to do is copy this same style to target 1 and target 2. Target 1, I'm using get computed style, and target 2, I'm using this old just style, inline style object. You see I get very different results. And this is kind of the complication you have in your site where you're trying to programmatically access styles, but you're dependent on the browsers